Are you sure you want to give up your dream career just for Henrique? I don't know, but I love Henrique very much. Maybe giving up my career is the right thing to do, if it makes us both happy. Besides, love is also sacrifice. It will all be worth it. Young Clara had a dream. The dream of designing beautiful clothes, seeing her creations on the runways, and making a name for herself in the fashion world. Yet when Henrique, the heir to a wealthy family empire, proposed to her, Clara felt torn between two futures. One path led to independence and creative glory, the other to love and stability. For her, the decision seemed clear. She chose Henrique. She believed in love more than ambition, and for him, she was willing to let go of everything she had built. At least, that's what she thought was the price of happiness. But there was someone who did not share Clara's joy, her half-sister, Viviane. From the outside, Viviane played the role of a supportive sibling, smiling at dress fittings and pretending to fuss over the details of the wedding. Inside, however, her heart burned with jealousy. She had always felt overshadowed by Clara's talent, her kindness, and the way people admired her without effort. Viviane wanted what Clara had, and more than that, she wanted Clara to have nothing. Greed whispered to her at night, telling her this marriage was her chance to shatter her sister's world. And Viviane was willing to do whatever it took to see Clara fall. The morning of the wedding glowed with golden light streaming through the windows of the chapel. Clara, dressed in white lace that shimmered like dew, felt her heart race with anticipation. She was nervous, but hopeful. She imagined a life where she and Henrique would build something lasting, where sacrifice would not feel like loss but love. Guests filled the pews, their voices low and full of excitement, unaware that behind the soft music and sweet scents of roses, a storm was quietly forming. Viviane moved gracefully among the crowd, her lips curved into a polite smile, but her eyes told a different story. She had already chosen her weapon, words. As Henrique stood at the altar, adjusting his tie with anxious hands, Viviane leaned close to him. Her voice was low, coated in sugar, yet dripping with poison. She whispered a story that had no truth but was wrapped so tightly in confidence that it felt undeniable. She spoke of Clara's supposed doubts, her ambitions, and how she was using him to climb higher in society. Viviane painted a picture of betrayal so vivid that Henrique's chest tightened with anger. In that fragile moment, his trust in Clara shattered like glass. He didn't question Viviane's intentions. He didn't pause to look at the woman who had given up her dreams for him. He believed the lie. When Clara finally walked down the aisle, her step steady but her heart trembling with emotion, she noticed Henrique's cold stare. The man she loved, the man she had chosen over everything else, looked at her as if she were a stranger. Her smile faltered, but she pressed on, believing it was nerves. She never imagined that while she carried hope, Henrique carried fury. The vows were meant to bind them together, but his silence was louder than any words. Guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing that something was wrong, though no one could have predicted the cruelty that was about to unfold. Clara's world, so full of promise, was seconds away from collapsing. Henrique's voice finally broke the tension, but not with the tenderness Clara expected. Instead, his words lashed out in front of everyone. He accused her of lies, of manipulation, of marrying him for all the wrong reasons. Clara's face drained of color as gasps filled the room. She tried to speak, to explain, but her voice cracked under the weight of his anger. Every word she offered was swallowed by his refusal to listen. In that moment, he became a stranger too, one who could not see her love or sacrifice, only the shadows Viviane had painted. The humiliation struck her harder than any blow, leaving her trembling before the people who had come to celebrate her joy. Tears blurred her vision, and her heart screamed for her to run, but her feet felt rooted to the marble floor. The altar, once a symbol of new beginnings, became a stage for her greatest heartbreak. She searched Henrique's eyes for any sign of the man she loved, but found nothing, only bitterness and mistrust. Clara's hand shook as she lowered the bouquet she had clung to, the petals slipping away like the last pieces of her hope. Around her, whispers spread like wildfire, each one another cut to her spirit. This was not the life she had given up her dreams for. This was a nightmare unfolding in front of everyone she knew. And then, in one final act of cruelty, Henrique turned his back on her. He walked away, leaving Clara abandoned at the altar, the veil falling over her tear-stained face. The music stopped, the room froze, and time seemed to hold its breath. Clara felt exposed, betrayed, and utterly alone. The weight of humiliation pressed down on her chest until it was hard to breathe. She wanted to scream, to disappear, to wake up from what felt like a twisted dream. But there was no escape. Viviane stood in the corner, her smile subtle, almost hidden, but her eyes glimmered with victory. To her, the plan had worked perfectly. Clara staggered back from the altar, her body trembling as she clutched the side of her dress. Everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and trust had been ripped away in minutes. It wasn't just the end of her wedding day, it felt like the end of who she was. Guests avoided her eyes, unsure of what to say, unwilling to step forward. The silence around her was deafening, louder than any insult Henrique had thrown. Clara's sacrifice, her love, her dreams, had all been dismissed in one cruel moment. And yet, as her tears fell, she didn't notice a pair of watchful eyes in the distance, someone quietly witnessing everything. From the back of the church, a man she had never met before stood in the shadows, his gaze fixed on her broken figure. He hadn't come for the wedding, but fate had placed him there at that exact moment. Something in Clara's pain struck him deeply, as if her story had already tied itself to his. She couldn't see him, not yet, but his presence was undeniable. While everyone else turned away from her, he stayed, watching, waiting. Clara had no idea that this stranger, hidden in plain sight, was about to become the one person who could change everything. Clara burst out of the church doors, her veil slipping from her hair, her dress torn at the seams from where she had stumbled. Her heels clicked against the stone steps as she tried to steady her breath, but each gasp came out broken, swallowed by sobs she couldn't control. Guests called her name from behind, but she ignored them, desperate to escape the eyes that had seen her humiliation. She clutched her skirt in trembling hands, the white fabric now heavy with dirt and tears. The city outside felt too bright, too loud, mocking her pain. She raised her arm, frantically waving for a taxi, her chest burning with the weight of betrayal. For Clara, the only thought was to disappear, to find somewhere, anywhere, she could fall apart unseen. Car after car sped by, none stopping, and each rejection made her feel smaller. She hugged herself against the chill of the afternoon, the sound of traffic mixing with the pounding in her ears. Then, finally, a yellow cab slowed, pulling to the curb with a squeal of brakes. Clara rushed forward, nearly tripping as she yanked the door open. Her hands shook so badly she could barely grip the handle, but she managed to climb inside, clutching the seat like a lifeline. Her torn veil slipped fully away, carried off by the wind, and she didn't even turn to watch it go. In her mind, that veil was just another symbol of what had been stolen from her. All she wanted now was to be driven far, far away. But before the driver could hit the gas, a firm yet calm voice interrupted. "Excuse me, miss, would you mind if I share this cab? It's impossible to get one today." Clara looked up, startled, and her tear-filled eyes met a man in a tailored suit, his expression both kind and steady. His presence seemed out of place, too composed for the chaos around her. For a second, Clara wanted to say no, to cling to this escape as her own. But the weight of exhaustion and the sincerity in his tone stopped her protest. She nodded weakly, unable to muster words. The man slid in beside her, closing the door with quiet assurance, and suddenly, the small space of the taxi felt different, less lonely, almost safe. Clara pressed herself against the window, her reflection blurred by tears she could no longer wipe away. The man didn't bombard her with questions or pity. Instead, he simply sat there, his presence calm, his silence comforting. The driver glanced at them through the rearview mirror, but said nothing, sensing that this was no ordinary ride. Clara wanted to explain, to pour out the storm trapped in her chest, but her voice caught every time she tried. Her body shook with the aftershocks of heartbreak, and she covered her mouth to hide the sound. Yet, in that stillness, she felt something unusual. This stranger wasn't judging her. He was simply there, and somehow, that was enough. For Eduardo, the woman beside him was a mystery, but one he didn't dare disturb. He noticed her gown, her trembling hands, the faint shimmer of makeup smudged by tears. He didn't need to know the details to understand she had just lived through something unbearable. Instead of prying, he offered her the gift of space, of patience. He leaned slightly forward, telling the driver an address in a calm tone that steadied the air between them. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was deliberate, as if to say, "You're not alone right now." Clara's shoulders relaxed, just slightly, at his quiet confidence. It was the first sliver of peace she had felt since the altar crumbled beneath her feet. Minutes passed, the city blurring outside the cab windows, but time inside seemed suspended. Clara's sobs softened into shaky breaths, her exhaustion finally pushing through the layers of pain. She glanced at Eduardo briefly, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Thank you." Just 2 words, but they carried the weight of everything she couldn't yet say. Eduardo turned his head and offered a small, reassuring smile, not one of pity, but of understanding. That smile reached his eyes, warm enough to melt through the walls Clara had thrown up around herself. She looked away again quickly, embarrassed by her vulnerability, but for the first time since her world had collapsed, she didn't feel entirely shattered. The cab ride continued in silence, but it was a silence that spoke louder than words. The rhythm of the city faded as Clara's heart slowly steadied. Every now and then, she felt Eduardo's gaze shift toward her, not invasive, just present, like a hand waiting to catch her if she fell again. Something about him radiated steadiness, like a man who had carried storms of his own and learned how to walk through them. Clara didn't know who he was or why fate had put him in her path on the worst day of her life. Yet she felt the faintest spark, a whisper in her chest that perhaps the stranger's arrival wasn't random at all. As the cab slowed to a red light, Clara finally allowed herself to breathe deeply. The tears had stopped for now, leaving her hollow but strangely lighter. Eduardo tapped lightly on the glass, his posture relaxed yet deliberate, like a man who had all the time in the world. Clara studied him through the corner of her eye, noticing the sharp lines of his suit, the confidence in his frame, the calmness he carried like a shield. Who was this man who seemed so effortlessly composed while she sat beside him in ruins? She didn't dare ask, but the question gnawed at her, louder with every passing moment. The taxi lurched forward again, weaving through the city streets, carrying them both to destinations neither could predict. Clara had boarded that cab desperate to escape, believing she would vanish into the anonymity of the city. Instead, she found herself sharing space with a stranger who radiated comfort and mystery all at once. Eduardo hadn't asked for her story, but his quiet presence had already begun rewriting it in small, invisible ways. She still felt broken, still uncertain of tomorrow, but somewhere deep inside, a seed of hope stirred. Clara didn't know it yet, but this fleeting ride would not end as simply as it began. And so, as the cab disappeared into the bustling streets, the air seemed to hold a secret. For Clara, this was nothing more than a desperate flight from heartbreak. For Eduardo, it was the beginning of something he couldn't yet name. But for Destiny, it was the collision of 2 lives that were meant to intertwine. The truth of what this ride would set in motion lay hidden, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. What Clara believed was an ending was, in fact, only the beginning of a journey far larger than she could ever imagine. Clara had spent the last month rebuilding her strength, piece by piece, even though her heart still carried the scars of the altar betrayal. The memory of Henrique's cold eyes haunted her nights, but a quiet flame of determination began to grow inside her. She told herself she had to move forward, no matter the weight of the past. Yet, one morning, a single test changed everything. Clara's hands trembled as she held it, realizing she carried Henrique's child. Shock, fear, and an unexpected warmth rushed through her all at once. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she was fighting for her baby. The decision was both terrifying and empowering. Clara vowed she would raise the child alone, without depending on anyone, especially not Henrique. Tears fell as she whispered promises to the tiny life inside her, swearing to give it the love she had been denied. Her heart ached, but she felt a strength she never thought she had. For the first time, she wasn't the abandoned bride or the humiliated woman at the altar. She was a mother in the making, and that gave her courage. In that moment, Clara knew her child would be the reason she never surrendered again. With new purpose, Clara turned back to the one thing she had once abandoned for love, her dream of fashion design. Sketches covered her small apartment, each line drawn with passion and resolve. She poured her emotions into fabric, colors, and textures, creating designs that carried her pain and her hope. Nights bled into mornings, but Clara didn't care. Each creation was a step toward her freedom. She wanted her baby to grow up seeing a mother who never gave up. Her art wasn't just fashion anymore, it was survival, expression, and the proof that she was still alive inside. After weeks of relentless work, Clara finally landed an interview at one of the most prestigious fashion agencies in the city. Her heart pounded as she walked through the sleek glass doors, clutching her portfolio tightly. Everything about the building screamed success, the kind she used to dream of before love distracted her. As she sat in the waiting area, her mind swirled with doubts. Was she ready? Would they see her talent, or only the broken pieces of who she had been? Her future, and her baby's, depended on this chance. She refused to walk away defeated this time. The secretary called her name, and Clara stepped into the grand office, her breath catching in her throat. Behind the desk sat Eduardo, the businessman from that unforgettable taxi ride. His tailored suit and calm demeanor were the same, but his eyes held a warmth that surprised her. Clara froze, her mind racing to make sense of this coincidence. Eduardo rose to greet her, clearly just as surprised, though a smile tugged at his lips. In an instant, the painful memory of her wedding day mixed with the comfort of that cab ride. Fate, it seemed, had brought them together again. Their reunion was quiet but powerful. Eduardo studied her with genuine interest, not pity, as she nervously explained her designs. Clara felt her guard slowly crumble under his gaze, remembering the kindness he showed her when she was at her lowest. Something stirred in her chest, a fragile spark she hadn't felt since before everything collapsed. But Clara wasn't naive anymore. She couldn't let her heart lead her astray so easily. Still, Eduardo's presence soothed her soul, offering something she hadn't dared to hope for again, a gentle possibility of love. Clara left the meeting with her heart racing, torn between fear and hope. Eduardo's interest in her work was clear, but his interest in her felt even stronger. She couldn't deny the way her pulse quickened when their eyes met. Yet behind the warmth, a shadow loomed, Henrique, Viviane, and the secrets she still carried. Clara wanted to believe this was the beginning of something beautiful, but deep down, she knew the storm wasn't over. In fact, it was only gathering strength. What she didn't realize was that Eduardo carried secrets of his own, secrets that could change everything. Clara's life began to bloom in ways she never thought possible. Eduardo didn't just open doors for her career, he opened a space in her heart she had sworn shut forever. Their connection grew quietly at first, a slow build of trust and tenderness. But soon, every glance carried warmth, every touch carried meaning. Eduardo made her feel safe, seen, and cherished. He never flinched at her pregnancy. Instead, he placed his hand gently on her growing belly, promising he would stand beside her as a father. For Clara, this wasn't just love. It was healing. Her career soared under Eduardo's mentorship, though he never tried to control her vision. He admired her determination and encouraged her to lead boldly. Designers who once ignored her now fought for a chance to collaborate. Fashion shows she had only dreamed of became her reality, and applause followed wherever she went. With every success, Clara proved to herself that she was no longer defined by the girl abandoned at the altar. She was powerful, resilient, and building a future for her child. Beside her, Eduardo watched with pride, knowing her strength was what drew him closer every day. Their relationship deepened with every passing moment. Eduardo's presence filled the void Clara once believed would remain empty forever. His laughter echoed in her apartment, his patience soothed her doubts, and his unwavering faith in her steadied her when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. Slowly, Clara allowed herself to believe that love wasn't meant to destroy, but to nurture. When he knelt before her one evening, ring in hand, Clara's breath caught in disbelief. She wasn't sure if she deserved a second chance, but when she saw the devotion in his eyes, her answer was simple, yes. Their wedding was intimate but radiant with joy. This time, Clara walked down the aisle not in fear or desperation, but in strength and love. Eduardo stood waiting, his gaze steady, his smile gentle, and when their vows were exchanged, it felt like a promise to rewrite both of their lives. The applause, the music, the tears, it was nothing like the nightmare of her past. As the ceremony ended, Clara pressed her hand against her belly, whispering to her unborn child that they were finally safe, finally cherished. For the first time in a long time, peace wrapped around her like a warm embrace. But peace, Clara would soon learn, is fragile. Happiness filled her days, but shadows lingered at the edges of her new life. Eduardo seemed calm, yet there were moments his eyes darkened with secrets he never spoke aloud. Clara noticed, though she chose not to press him. After all, hadn't she built walls of silence too? Together, they lived in a fragile balance, building love while unknowingly standing on uncertain ground. Still, Clara believed in the sanctuary they were creating. She convinced herself that their happiness was unshakable, that the past couldn't touch them anymore. Yet destiny had other plans. One evening, a letter arrived that made Clara's hands tremble as she unfolded it. The words seemed to blur before her eyes, her heart pounding with disbelief. It wasn't from a stranger, nor from a faceless enemy, it was from the very past she thought she had escaped forever. The request written inside was shocking, bold, and impossible to ignore. Clara felt her blood run cold, realizing that her carefully rebuilt life was about to be tested. The letter didn't ask. It demanded. And it carried the signature of someone she never wanted to see again. Clara sat frozen, the letter slipping from her trembling fingers as Eduardo entered the room. She quickly wiped her tears, hiding the storm behind her eyes. He asked what was wrong, but she forced a smile, tucking the paper away before he could see. Fear and doubt clawed at her chest, yet she couldn't bring herself to tell him, not yet. Because what the letter demanded could shatter everything they had built together. Clara thought she had escaped her past. She thought love had saved her. But the truth was undeniable, her story with Henrique was far from over. 3 years had passed, and Clara's world looked nothing like the shattered pieces she once gathered at the church steps. She was now a mother, her son filling her days with laughter and endless love. Her career flourished beyond her wildest dreams, her designs gracing international runways and magazines. With Eduardo by her side, life felt secure, vibrant, and full of hope. Clara often paused to reflect, amazed by how far she had come from the broken bride she once was. But even in her joy, the shadow of her past never fully left her heart. It was a crisp afternoon when the past walked back into her life. Henrique stood at her studio's door, older, weary, and carrying a look of deep remorse. Clara froze at the sight of him, the man who once crushed her soul with a single choice. His voice trembled as he confessed the truth. Viviane had poisoned his mind with lies, and he had believed her. The regret weighed heavy on his shoulders, and every word dripped with sorrow. Henrique wasn't there to reclaim power. He was there to beg forgiveness. His eyes searched hers desperately, pleading for a second chance at dignity. Clara listened silently, her heart torn between rage and empathy. She had once loved Henrique, and part of her still carried the scar of that love. But she was no longer the woman who would sacrifice her dreams for him. Eduardo had shown her what true devotion meant, and her son was the proof of her strength. Still, she saw the broken man in front of her and chose mercy over bitterness. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, but it was a gift she gave herself as much as him. With a steady voice, she told Henrique that the past was gone and so was her love for him. But forgiveness carried its limits. Henrique's eyes fell on the little boy running across the room, his smile wide and innocent. Questions filled his gaze, but Clara acted quickly, introducing the child as Eduardo's son. Her heart pounded, yet her voice didn't tremble. Henrique accepted the explanation, a small smile breaking across his face, though something in his eyes revealed doubt. Clara prayed he would never look closer, never suspect the truth. Protecting her son's identity was non-negotiable. Eduardo was the only father he would ever know, and Clara would guard that secret with her life. In the weeks that followed, Henrique's presence became a delicate thread in their lives. He offered friendship, even support, trying to prove he had changed. Clara remained cautious, always keeping distance, never allowing him too close to her family. Eduardo, ever perceptive, sensed the tension but trusted Clara's decisions. To outsiders, it seemed like a fragile peace was forming. But Clara's instincts whispered otherwise. Life had taught her that peace rarely lasted, especially when tied to people who had once destroyed her. She was right to be wary, because someone else was waiting in the dark, filled with venom. Viviane had never disappeared, she had been watching all along. From the shadows, she saw Clara's success, Eduardo's love, and the child that should have never existed in her mind. Every achievement of Clara's fueled the fire of Viviane's jealousy. Hatred twisted her heart, leaving no room for reason. She felt robbed of everything, Henrique's affection, status, and now even the life she believed she deserved. In her obsession, Clara's happiness became intolerable. Viviane wasn't just angry, she was consumed. And that kind of rage could only end in destruction. Her plan unfolded in silence, careful and cruel. Viviane wasn't after reconciliation or understanding, she wanted revenge. Every move she made was calculated to strike at Clara where it hurt most, her career, her family, and her heart. She began weaving a trap that Clara couldn't see, one meant to strip away everything she had rebuilt. And while Clara believed the danger had passed with forgiveness, she was blind to the storm about to break. The real threat wasn't Henrique's return, but the monster growing in Viviane's bitterness. And soon, that monster would make its first move. Viviane's jealousy had grown into something dangerous, a fire that burned hotter each day she saw Clara's joy. It wasn't enough for her to hate silently, she needed to act. Watching from the shadows, she searched for the perfect opportunity, and one evening it came. Clara's son left his brush on the dresser, a few strands of hair tangled between its bristles. Viviane's hands trembled as she held it, a wicked smile crossing her face. In that moment, she knew she had found the weapon that could shatter Clara's world. With the strand of hair hidden in her purse, Viviane went to Henrique. She found him still lingering in regret, trying to mend his life and his mistakes. Twisting the truth like a blade, she whispered that Clara's boy wasn't Eduardo's after all. She painted it as a betrayal, convincing Henrique that Clara had stolen his rightful son. Her words dripped with poison, disguised as concern. "Don't you deserve to know the truth?" she pressed, feeding his doubts and stoking his wounded pride. Henrique, fragile and desperate, let her words take root. The DNA test was easy to arrange, though Henrique's heart pounded the entire time. When the results came back, the truth was undeniable: the boy was his biological son. For a moment, silence fell around him, as if the world had stopped spinning. Then came the storm. Rage, grief, betrayal, all crashing at once inside him. Clara's lie cut deeper than any wound Viviane could have inflicted directly. Henrique's regret turned into a dangerous obsession. He couldn't see Clara's reasons, only the deception. And in his anger, he decided he had been robbed of fatherhood. Viviane stood back, pleased with the chaos she had created. To her, this was more than revenge, it was justice twisted into her own design. She watched Henrique unravel, knowing his fury would do what she couldn't alone: destroy Clara's family from within. The cruelest part was how easily he believed her story. Viviane's lies were the fuel, but Henrique's pride was the fire. And now that fire was out of control. She didn't need to strike directly anymore. She had planted the seed, and Henrique was about to water it with rage. Henrique confronted Clara with the results, his voice heavy with bitterness. Clara's face went pale, her hands shaking as she tried to explain. But her words fell on deaf ears. To him, her silence and secrecy were proof enough of betrayal. Love turned into accusation, and regret transformed into vengeance. Henrique was no longer the man seeking forgiveness, he was a father demanding his right. And to him, that meant taking his son, no matter the cost. Clara, terrified, clung to her child, but she knew Henrique's fury would not stop there. Fueled by anger and convinced he had the law on his side, Henrique filed for custody. He painted Clara as deceitful, unfit to make decisions about their son's future. The courtroom became his battlefield, and Viviane his silent general, watching gleefully as her plan unfolded. Clara felt her world spinning out of control once again, caught between truth and consequences. She feared losing her child more than anything else, but the odds looked stacked against her. Her secret, meant to protect, had now become the weapon used against her. But what Viviane didn't anticipate was Eduardo. Quiet, steady Eduardo, who had been watching all of this unfold with sharp eyes and a protective heart. He knew the truth could be twisted, but he also knew lies never stood forever. Behind the scenes, Eduardo prepared something Viviane hadn't accounted for, a move that could turn the trial upside down. He wasn't just defending his wife, he was defending the family they had built. And the moment of truth was closer than anyone realized. The courtroom was packed, tension hanging thick in the air like a storm waiting to break. Clara sat clutching her son's hand, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt exposed, every eye on her, every whisper a reminder of the chaos Viviane had unleashed. Henrique sat across from her, pride and anger etched on his face, convinced the law would favor him. The judge watched silently, the gavel ready, but no one anticipated the entrance of Eduardo, calm yet determined. He stepped forward, his presence alone demanding attention. Clara felt a flicker of hope, she knew he had a plan. Eduardo's lawyer, a sharp and commanding presence, began laying out the evidence meticulously. Witness statements, timelines, and documents were presented, each piece connecting like a puzzle. Eduardo spoke clearly, his voice steady, revealing Viviane's manipulation with precise detail. Every lie she had whispered to Henrique, every seed of doubt she had planted, was exposed in full. The courtroom shifted in energy, whispers grew louder as the audience realized the depth of the betrayal. Clara's hands trembled, but she felt Eduardo's steady gaze, grounding her. For the first time in years, she sensed justice might truly prevail. Then came the most crucial revelation, why Clara had kept her child's paternity a secret. Eduardo explained her fear, her need to protect her son from chaos, and the weight of the lies she had been forced to endure. He painted Clara not as deceitful, but as a mother who had sacrificed her peace for her child's safety. Henrique's expression flickered, confusion, guilt, and shock all crossing his face. The truth was undeniable, and it shattered the story he had believed for so long. Viviane's lips pressed tight, realizing her plan had begun to crumble under the weight of facts. Witnesses were called to corroborate Eduardo's statements, including friends and neighbors who had seen Viviane's schemes unfold. Each testimony added another layer of clarity, revealing how far Viviane had gone to manipulate everyone. Clara listened silently, feeling a mix of relief and lingering tension. The walls she had built around herself began to feel safer, as if justice itself was reinforcing them. Henrique shifted uncomfortably in his seat, finally recognizing the full scope of Viviane's lies. He was no longer certain of anything he had believed. The ground beneath him had cracked entirely. The judge leaned forward, reviewing the evidence and listening to the closing arguments. Every word spoke to Clara's integrity, her love for her child, and the malicious intent behind Viviane's actions. Silence filled the room as the gavel finally came down. In a voice that resonated with authority, the judge ruled in Clara's favor, granting her full custody of her son. Relief washed over her, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. Eduardo squeezed her hand gently, a silent promise that he would always protect them. Viviane's face drained of color, her defeat complete, for now. Henrique finally looked at Clara with a mixture of regret and newfound understanding. He realized the woman he had abandoned was not the fragile bride he had left at the altar, but a strong, loving mother and partner. The weight of his past mistakes pressed heavily on him, leaving him speechless for a moment. Yet beneath the apology in his eyes, there lingered something unspoken, a truth he had yet to reveal. Clara felt a chill creep down her spine, sensing that the battle was far from over. There was more coming, something that could shake the foundations of what she believed about Viviane. As the courtroom emptied, Clara clutched her son, Eduardo, close by her side, feeling victory and caution in equal measure. She had won the trial, but the echoes of Viviane's betrayal still lingered. Henrique hesitated at the doorway, then finally approached her, lowering his voice. He was about to tell her something that could change everything she knew about her sister. Clara's heart pounded, the walls of her past and present colliding in anticipation. And in that instant, she realized the story she thought had ended was far from over. Henrique's voice trembled as he finally revealed everything to Clara, the secrets Viviane had hidden so well now laid bare. He admitted the lies, the manipulations, and the twisted games that had caused so much pain. Clara listened, her chest tight, anger and sorrow colliding with the memories she had tried to bury. Every word painted a clearer picture of Viviane's cruelty and obsession. Yet alongside the rage, there was relief, clarity at last, the truth she had longed for. Henrique's confession was heavy, but it carried a strange kind of closure. Clara felt the first glimmer of freedom from the shadows that had haunted her. With resolve hardening in her heart, Clara sought out Viviane. The confrontation was tense, the air thick with years of anger and resentment. Viviane looked smaller than Clara remembered, her power diminished, her arrogance stripped away. She avoided Clara's gaze, but the hatred in her eyes lingered like a storm about to break. Clara stood tall, her voice steady yet gentle, forcing the weight of truth to land between them. "I know everything," she said, letting the words sink in. Viviane flinched but said nothing, realizing that her manipulations had failed. Clara's words carried both authority and empathy. She recounted the pain Viviane had caused, the chaos she had tried to unleash, and the lives she had sought to ruin. Every lie Viviane had whispered, every calculated move, now had no power over Clara or her family. Yet Clara didn't deliver the final blow. She held back, choosing instead to show strength through restraint. Viviane's lips trembled, and for the first time, she seemed truly afraid. Clara's presence, calm yet unwavering, was a mirror showing Viviane what she had lost in her obsession. The confrontation reached its emotional peak when Clara spoke of her son. "The hatred you planted can no longer live in my house or near my child," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Viviane's eyes widened, her bitterness crashing against the immovable wall of Clara's forgiveness. She had expected fear, tears, or desperation, but Clara offered none. Instead, Clara offered closure, boundaries, and a limit to the chaos Viviane could cause. It was a sentence no court could pass, a truth Viviane could neither manipulate nor escape. Viviane's shoulders sagged as reality sank in. Alone and broken, she finally understood that her power had vanished, that the life she had tried to destroy now thrived without her. Clara's forgiveness was not weakness, it was a force stronger than any grudge or deception. She turned to leave, the confrontation over, her presence a final imprint of dignity and resilience. Viviane stood frozen, unable to speak, watching the woman she envied walk away stronger than ever. For a fleeting moment, it seemed as though Viviane's story had ended in defeat. But Clara didn't allow herself to relax completely. She knew forgiveness didn't erase danger entirely, that some shadows lingered long after the light returned. Viviane may have seemed defeated, but Clara's instincts whispered caution. Every victory carried a price, and she had learned that the world rarely revealed all its truths at once. Something darker, hidden behind Viviane's collapse, was still stirring. Clara tightened her grip on her son, feeling the pulse of life and love she would defend at all costs. As Viviane disappeared from sight, Clara exhaled, her heart both heavy and lighter. She had reclaimed her peace and her child, yet the air carried a quiet warning. The next betrayal, she sensed, would not come from remorseful Henrique, but from the darkness Viviane still held in secret. And in that uncertainty, Clara understood that vigilance and love must walk together. She turned back toward her home, resolved, knowing that even in moments of victory, the storm could return. Something unseen, a shadow of betrayal, was ready to strike when she least expected it. Days after Viviane's confrontation, Clara felt the uneasy calm of a storm that had passed, but Eduardo sensed there was more she needed to know. He approached her carefully, holding a worn, leather-bound diary he had discovered among Viviane's things. Clara's curiosity mingled with apprehension. She had thought she understood everything about her sister. But Eduardo's expression told her this revelation would shake even her strongest convictions. He opened the diary, revealing pages filled with raw thoughts, hidden fears, and truths that had been buried for decades. Clara's heart pounded. Eduardo read aloud slowly, letting each word sink into Clara's mind. The diary detailed Viviane's childhood, her struggles with identity, and the constant feeling of being an outsider in a family she believed she belonged to. Each page exposed the roots of her jealousy, her obsession, and the bitterness that had driven her to destroy Clara's happiness. Clara's chest tightened as the pieces fell into place, connecting the past to Viviane's relentless schemes. The anger she had felt now mingled with a bittersweet understanding. There was pain behind the cruelty, a pain that had never been hers to heal. Then came the final, shattering revelation: Viviane was never Clara's biological half-sister. She had been adopted by Clara's father and his first wife after losing her own family in a tragic accident. The identity she clung to, the rivalry she felt, and the resentment that had fueled years of manipulation were all rooted in the fact that she had never truly belonged. Clara's mind raced as the truth sank in. Everything about Viviane's actions suddenly made sense: the relentless need to prove herself, the envy, the sense of exclusion. The years of suffering, now reframed in a tragic light, changed everything. Clara felt a complex swirl of emotions: sadness for the girl Viviane had been, relief that her own family had not been at fault, and awe at the resilience it must have taken for Viviane to survive in her own way. Eduardo placed a hand gently on her shoulder, grounding her as the storm of revelation hit. Clara realized that the enemy she had feared for so long had been shaped by circumstances beyond her control. Yet understanding didn't excuse the damage Viviane had caused, it merely illuminated why the woman had acted with such fury and obsession. The knowledge shifted Clara's perspective, transforming the narrative of her past. Viviane's attacks were not simply acts of malice, they were the expressions of a deep, lifelong insecurity. Clara felt a surprising empathy, tempered by caution. The story of her sister was tragic, but it was not complete without recognizing the pain she had caused. Each memory of betrayal, each act of jealousy, now carried a weight that Clara could finally contextualize. Viviane had not been born cruel, she had been wounded, abandoned in identity, and driven to lash out in ways she did not fully understand herself. Clara exhaled, a mixture of relief and sorrow washing over her. The shadow of Viviane's deception no longer carried the same sting, it was softened by the truth. Eduardo's calm presence reminded her that knowledge and love could coexist even after betrayal. For the first time, Clara felt a sense of closure, a clarity she had longed for throughout the years of pain. Yet the revelation also planted a seed of caution. Knowing the past didn't mean the future was predictable. Viviane's story was still entwined with theirs, and vigilance remained essential. As Clara held her son close, she reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from heartbreak at the altar to battles in court, from hidden secrets to unexpected love. She understood now that forgiveness and insight were intertwined, and that clarity often came after enduring storms. Viviane's insecurity, her anger, and her manipulations were finally understood, but the lesson was unmistakable: empathy and vigilance must coexist. Clara's life had been reshaped by revelations, but it also carried the promise of peace. And in that quiet moment, she knew one truth above all: understanding someone's pain does not erase the necessity to protect what you love most. Clara's career reached heights she had once only dreamed of, her designs showcased across the globe, admired by critics and fans alike. Each collection reflected her journey, pain, resilience, and triumph woven into every stitch. The woman who had once been abandoned at the altar now commanded the fashion world with confidence and grace. She walked the runway herself, proud and radiant, embodying the strength she had discovered in the chaos of her past. Clara's success wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal, a testament to perseverance and self-belief. Her story inspired others to reclaim their lives. Her son thrived in the love and stability that Clara and Eduardo provided. Eduardo, ever devoted, embraced fatherhood with warmth and patience, guiding him with care and kindness. Henrique, though distant, maintained a respectful presence, aware of the boundaries Clara had established. The boy grew up surrounded by love, learning resilience from his mother and the value of support from both father figures. The past was no longer a shadow over his life, it existed only as a cautionary tale of choices and consequences. Clara watched him flourish, her heart full of pride and relief. Viviane disappeared quietly, a ghost of the woman who had once caused so much chaos. Rumors swirled briefly about her whereabouts, but none ever reached Clara or Eduardo. It seemed that the weight of her own insecurities had finally consumed her, leaving her powerless to interfere again. Clara felt a mix of sadness and closure, knowing that Viviane's story had ended without further tragedy. The threat she had posed was gone, allowing Clara and her family to breathe fully for the first time. Peace, at last, seemed attainable. At a grand fashion show celebrating her latest collection, Clara took the stage to speak, her voice carrying through the glittering hall. Cameras flashed, and the audience held its collective breath as she shared her journey. True lifestyle isn't in the clothes we wear, but in the choices we make, and the love we choose to cultivate, she said, her words resonating far beyond fashion. Applause erupted, yet the room felt charged with more than admiration. It carried the energy of triumph over adversity, the proof of a life reclaimed. Her speech touched hearts, inspiring courage and hope. Every detail of her life now reflected the lessons she had learned: trust, perseverance, and the power of love over revenge. Clara understood that success wasn't simply wealth or recognition, it was the ability to rise above betrayal, to protect and nurture her family, and to live authentically. Each design she created was infused with this wisdom, a celebration of life's complex beauty. Clara felt a deep gratitude for the journey, for Eduardo's unwavering support, and for the son who had changed her heart in ways she could never have imagined. The fashion world marveled at her collections, but Clara remained grounded, never forgetting the struggles that had shaped her. She continued mentoring young designers, sharing her experience and guiding them to pursue their passions fearlessly. Her influence extended far beyond clothes. It was a message of resilience, love, and integrity. Clara had become more than a designer. She had become a symbol of overcoming adversity, a living testament to the idea that strength and compassion could coexist in even the most challenging circumstances. As the show ended and the lights dimmed, Clara stood backstage, Eduardo beside her, her son laughing nearby. The applause still echoed in her ears, but it was the quiet moments, family together, love protected, and truth unveiled, that truly defined her victory. Viviane's shadow no longer loomed, Henrique's remorse had found its place, and Clara's life was her own. She understood, fully and finally, that true triumph was measured not by wealth or fame, but by the choices made, the love given, and the courage to rebuild. She smiled, ready for the life she had earned. Clara found her ultimate victory, not just as a successful designer, but as a woman who overcame heartbreak and humiliation. Her story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest victories are found after the deepest betrayals. If this emotional story resonated with you, like and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories about love, betrayal, and triumph. What would you have done if you were in Clara's situation? Tell us in the comments below.